Hey everyone, welcome to WASD20. My name is Nate, and this video is intended to be a buyer's guide for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition for people who are fairly new to D&D. I find that one of the most commonly asked questions on forums and online is, what exactly should I buy? And so I'm hoping to answer that question. Now the short answer to that question is nothing. You don't need to buy anything. But you probably came hoping for a little more information than that. So I'll give you some of my thoughts. First off, we're going to take a look at the products that have been released so far for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, which began release back in July of 2014. And secondly, we'll take a look at my specific recommendations, what I would recommend you actually buy. So without further ado, let's get going. So here's a look at some of the stuff you can buy for D&D 5th edition, and this is what I've bought so far. But before we start talking about that, I think it's important to talk about the free stuff. This is the reason you don't really need to buy anything. So what we have here are the free PDFs that I have printed out, and you can access them at dungeonsanddragons.com. I'll put the link down in the description below. But as we take a look here, the first thing I printed out is the D&D basic rules. The basic rules is all that you need to know to get going in the game, and it gives you character creation rules, rules for combat, and just the basics of how to play the game. Magic, gear. So this really has everything you need to play the game for absolutely nothing. It's free, alright? And they've updated it since I printed this one out. But anyway, you should check that out if you're interested. The second thing is another free PDF. This time it is the Dungeon Master's basic rules. This is really great because it includes, just very brief, just a few pages on kind of running a game and some more rules. But the main thing that's awesome is all the monsters. And so there are something like 100 monsters in here. Just a mini bestiary monster manual, call it what you will, full of lots of creepy, good creatures. It also does have a few pages of rules in the back, but for the most part, yeah, this is just all kinds of animals, monsters, ghouls, and creatures. Okay, so those are the two basic PDFs that are available for free on Wizards of the Coast website. Next, let's take a look at the starter set. The starter set retails for $19.99. If you go to Toys R Us or Barnes & Noble, you'll pay more than that because they like to rip you off. They mark things up. And but if you go to your game shop, you can find it for $19.99, and I think on Amazon it goes for $12. So what you get in this is everything you need to start playing the world's greatest role-playing game. All right, and so we've got a bag of polyhedral dice here. We've got a starter set rulebook, which is basically an abbreviated version of the free PDF, and it does have a little bit of art and some flavor text and such. But it's basically the free PDF without character creation stuff. All right, so it doesn't have how to create a character because the starter set comes with pre-generated characters. Got the Lost Mind of Fendelver. This is the starter set adventure. So this is a pre-written adventure that a DM can run for a group of players, and yeah, I've heard it's pretty good. Then we've got the pre-generated characters. Again, this is the reason they don't have character creation rules. If you do want to create a character, you still could do this. You would just need to go to the free PDFs, and you could use that character to play in a game in the starter set. But yeah, you've got quite a few pre-generated characters here. I think there's 2 fighters, cleric, rogue, and a wizard. All right. And if you flip over to the back of these, you can see a little more detail. Yeah, just a little background info about the character. But you can name the character yourself and have a blast. Then also in the starter set, they have this wonderful ad for D&D Encounters, which is a form of organized play, and then a nice big cardboard spacer with nothing underneath. All right, so that is the starter set. Next, we're going to take a look at the Player's Handbook. The Player's Handbook is kind of the main core book. If you're going to buy one of the D&D books, this is probably the one to buy. I'll talk more about my recommendations later. But this book has all of the stuff in the basic rules and more. So it's just an expanded version of the basic rules with some nice art, a nice glossy hardcover, and it does have more options. So it's got more rules. It has more races, like the half-orc, the dragonborn, the tiefling, the gnome, half-elf as well. So it's got more races than the free PDFs. It's got more classes as well. It adds barbarian, bard, druid, monk, paladin, ranger, sorcerer, and warlock. So quite a few more classes. And it has about twice as many spells as the free PDF does for your magic classes. And yeah, it's just got a lot more options. So here's a bunch of spells. Lots and lots of spells. And it does have this creature stats, which is basically less than what you would find in the free PDF. So rather than use this, you can find a lot more in the free PDF. Then you've got your character sheets here, which you can photocopy. All right, so that is the Player's Handbook. And this is kind of the main core book that has all the basic rules that you would need. The next book I have here is the Monster Manual. And the Monster Manual is an expanded list of monsters, whereas the basic rules had about 100 of them. By the looks of it here, there are something like 300 monsters. Probably not quite that many, but anyway, somewhere around 300 monsters. So a lot more. And yeah, it's got more description of each monster too. So whereas in the basic rules, you would have a very brief description, here they're going to have a longer description and some nasty art. Alright, so this is the Monster Manual, and yeah, love this book. It's just a great one. Lots of fun. Next up, we have the Dungeon Master's Guide. I have a full review of this. I'll put the link down in the corner, and you can check that out. But this is the most recently released book, and this is for the Dungeon Master, obviously. More of a tool, really, that you can use to help build a game world, and tips for how to run a game. And then it's just got all sorts of good stuff. Lots and lots of role tables like this that you can, use to help determine things and make decisions about your game world and the adventures that you run. And it's also got some optional rules that go beyond what were in the Player's Handbook, and it's got lots and lots of magic items. So anyway, if you want more detail on this, check out my other video on the Dungeon Master's Guide, but it is also a really solid book. Next up, there are two books that I actually do not own, and I don't really have the intention of buying them anytime soon. And they are the Tyranny of Dragons adventures, and there are two books, The Hoard of the Dragon Queen and The Rise of Tiamat. And they are, again, pre-written adventures, much like the Mines of Fendelver that comes with the starter set, but they are quite a bit longer. They come in a nice glossy hardcover with some nice art and all that stuff. So those are just two pre-written adventure modules, campaigns that you can run a group through. Now that we have covered all the books that have been released so far for D&D 5th edition, let's talk about my buying recommendations. So I'm going to describe a couple scenarios here. The first scenario. Let's imagine you don't know anyone who plays D&D and you want to get started with your friends or family. Then my recommendation would be to buy the starter set. Why? It's cheap. It is $19.99 at retail. You can get it for $12 on Amazon in the US. So it's really just incredibly affordable. Even if you don't feel you need it, the free PDFs, for example, give you plenty that you would need. You're probably going to need to buy a set of polyhedral dice, and guess what? The starter set comes with that. And if you buy that in the store, it might run you $5 or $10, and so you're almost to 12 right there already, halfway there. All right, so that's one thing to consider. The other thing to consider with the starter set is the pre-written adventure. If you are totally new to D&D This is going to be really helpful because you might not have any clue where to start running a group through an adventure, and creating your own adventure might be a very daunting thing. It certainly was for me when I was pretty new to the hobby less than a year ago. So something like this, The Lost Mind of Phandelver, is going to be really helpful. A pre-written adventure. It has maps, it has monster stats, it has all kinds of stuff that are going to be very useful for your players. Now, let's imagine the second scenario. Let's imagine you know people who play and you are wanting to join in. My recommendation in that case would be, at first, don't really buy anything. Try it out. Just get playing. See if you like it. If you want to, you can go online and check out the free PDFs, but chances are, if you have a good DM, you can just show up. They might even have dice for you. You might not even have to have your own set of dice. And a good DM will help lead you through, and the best way to learn the rules is by playing the game. So, sure, it might be helpful to read up a little bit and to try to understand the game a bit before you show up. The others might appreciate that. But really, you don't need much to start playing. Just show up, dive in, and have a good time. Now, if you find that in that process you really like the game and you're feeling invested in it and you want to go a little further, then I would recommend buying the Player's Handbook. The Player's Handbook just gives you all the options, all the rules, and it's in a nice glossy hardcover that you can put on your coffee table and enjoy. So I do recommend this book. It retails for $50 or $30 on Amazon in the US. Whether you're wanting to take your game to the next level as a player or you're thinking about DMing, if you only own one book, this has got to be it. If you haven't bought a book yet, this is the first one you should buy. Now, let's talk about some scenarios in which you might want to buy some of this other stuff. If you're thinking about DMing and you want to begin creating your own game world or even adventures within another existing game world, you'll probably want to pick up the Dungeon Master's Guide. It gives you great tools to help make the process of running games a lot easier. It also includes some of the optional rules I mentioned before that can be used to help make the game your own. You can kind of pick and choose from some of the rules that are in here. So there's just all kinds of good stuff here, on creating campaigns, different styles of gameplay. Again, I recommend watching my other video on this, but I just have found this book immensely helpful, and now that I have it, I can't imagine trying to run games without it. It just makes it so much easier to have all these tools at my disposal. But, if you're new to DMing and you have the starter set, I would say stick with that for a while. You don't need this. Run your group through the entire starter set, and then if you're thinking about branching out and trying to create your own campaign after that, your own game world maybe, then check this out. The Monster Manual is another additional tool that gives you way more options for monsters. I happen to think that the free DM rules PDF has plenty of monsters, somewhere around 100 as I mentioned before. But man, I love my Monster Manual. It is so much fun. I just love sitting with this book and reading it and learning more about all these colorful, obscure beasts. And I've just really fallen in love with this book as a book to just sit down and read. So I do recommend it, but again, this is far from a necessity, and I would say it's probably the least necessary book of all the D&D 5th edition books. That's my personal opinion. Now, in terms of the Tyranny of Dragons adventure books, The Hoard of the Dragon Queen and The Rise of Tiamat, for newcomers, I'd recommend holding off on these until you've run the starter set adventure, The Mines of Phandelver. After that, if you are still wanting more pre-written adventure, you don't feel like you're quite ready to jump into crafting your own adventures or worlds, then maybe you want to pick these up. I've heard mostly positive things about them, some mixed reviews, but if you're interested, it is another hardcover, pretty book to add to the collection. But again, I'd recommend buying most of the other books before getting these. Alright, so this section is kind of an honorable mention of other products you might want to consider buying. First off, dice. You're going to want some dice, a lot of dice. If you're running a game and you have all new players who aren't bringing their own dice, I recommend going on Amazon and buying a big pack of something like 100 polyhedral dice for $20 or so. That's what I did, and I just have a lot of dice and I'll never run out. Or you can buy your own very fancy sets of dice for a lot more money, and that's kind of fun too. The other thing is spellbook cards. These are far from a necessity, but they are a handy tool to have. And if you want to learn more about them, I've got a full review. I'll put the link down there. The last thing you might want to think about getting is some miniatures. Now, you don't need miniatures. You can play Theater of the Mind, and I think that's great. I think it's a lot of fun playing that way. But some people like to play with grids and minis too, and in that case, you're going to want to get some miniatures and a battle mat of some sort, some kind of map. I have a video on how I made my own battle mat, and you can check that out, the link down here, how I made my own on the cheap. Now, to conclude this little buyer's guide, I'll just say I've really been liking 5th edition. I really like all of these products, and I'm glad I have them all. Now, you don't need to buy any of this stuff. Once again, just to reiterate that, you can get the free PDFs and you'll be good to go for quite a while, possibly forever. But if you have the money, I think these products are worth it. I'm sure enjoying each one of them. Thanks for joining me for this buyer's guide, and if you have any comments or questions, I would love to hear from you in the feedback below. And until next time, everybody take care and happy gaming.